Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to go and join Polly in a moment, sitting over there, but I've got a couple of slides that just to really give us some context. But what I'd like to say at the beginning is please, I noticed that nobody had any questions after Raphael's fascinating presentation just now. Please be ready to ask some questions. Please interrupt us. It would be great if this was a conversation, not just a presentation. And the first thing to say. The second thing is I'm just going to put up, as I said, just 2 slides to give you some context, but this is going to be very much a conversation. Even if you don't take part, it's going to be a conversation between Polly and myself. Polly and I work together on various projects. We're also very good friends, but we argue a lot.
We bicker.
We don't see things the same way, so don't be surprised about that. Essentially, my role is partly to paint the picture of the world as I see it today and moving forward over the next 5 years, let's say, so rather longer than Raphael's been talking about. And Polly's role is going to be to look at how we are going to deal with some of those things, particularly in the fields of communication and marketing. But just to give you a little bit of background, COVID, we've heard a little bit about, and actually I'm not going to talk very much about COVID. I think we all kind of know quite a lot about that. But we also have those other acts of nature in the form of climate change, and the biggest thing that I think affects all of us is irregular harvests. It's the fact that we just don't know. As somebody said to me, my grandmother always said, if it rains on this date, the harvest will be early or late. None of the old rules apply anymore. So we're going to have big harvests and small harvests, and we're not going to know. And that, whether you're in bulk wine or bottled wine, is the biggest challenge. We also have acts of what I call acts of man or woman, but usually the bad ones are done by men. We have tariffs in China, as we've seen, and Australia suffered. America, my own French wine, suffered from Donald Trump's tariffs. We've had lockdowns. Anyone in South Africa wasn't able just to export their wines. Yes, that was COVID, but it was a government move. We have new regulations. If you look at Russia, so I'm selling more wine in Russia now than I was because I pivoted to Russia during the Trump tariffs. But anybody who's been following the news, read Miningers, will know that we've had some moves towards champagne labeling in Russia. There are going to be some other things that may be coming our way in Russia that may make some of us more nervous. And then, of course, as a Brit, I have to be aware of Brexit. And quite a lot of wine that was going into the UK and being bottled in the UK and re-exported, that's not happening. And quite a lot of wine that was coming into the UK isn't coming in anymore. So that's another thing. Now, secondly, other broader trends, and I'm going to go through these very quickly. Consumption is going up a bit this year, but in the big picture, it's going down in most markets, and RTDs and other drinks are competing very toughly. Consolidation is happening at every level. Companies are taking over each other, both at the level of wineries. In Bordeaux, we are losing more than one winery every day as wineries consolidate, but also in terms of distribution, that's happening in a big way. We have this polarization of what we could call luxury and masstige, which is not quite luxury, but expensive wines, in the US in particular. And this week, we've seen the purchase of Frank Family Vineyards for $315 million by Treasury Wine Estates in California. And Treasury did not even take all the vineyards. What they wanted was the brand. And the reason they wanted the brand was that it's a $30 to $225 wine business. And actually, its profitability is twice, nearly more than twice, Treasury's profitability in the US. Low and no alcohol are coming our way in like a truck. Those are not one category. Those are 2 categories. I think that's quite important. The other thing is you will all hear about everybody wants natural, everyone wants indigenous grapes or autochthonous grapes and so on. No. Some people, generally critics and sommeliers, want those. Look at the US market and you'll see that red blends, which don't tell you where they're from and don't tell you what they're made of, are actually growing fast. And this morning I met somebody from Australia who has had a big he's had difficulty selling his wine in the US because it's Australian and Shiraz. He has put the same wine into bottles now. They don't say Shiraz anymore. They say red blend. It's got some Cabernet in it, but that doesn't really matter. And the word Australia is in very, very, very small print on the back label, and he's doing much better. So there's a lesson to be learned there. Celebrity, almost every day there's a new celebrity wine. Many people in the wine industry don't like that, but it's working very strongly, and it's at every level, and that's very relevant to the bulk wine market, obviously. We've got, at a social level, diversity in every respect is becoming more and more of an issue, which we're going to look at. Sustainability and organic, yes, those do matter, but not necessarily for everybody and not necessarily in every state. Distribution, which is also relevant to sustainability in terms of whether you're going to package and ship in bulk, packaging, what kind of packaging you're going to use, which brings us to cans, which are obviously a theme of this year's bulk fair. So I'm leaving those on the screen, and now I'm going to open the conversation with Polly and with you as to how we as an industry, whether in bulk or in bottle or bottle and bulk, actually get through and over some of these issues.
Okay. So now I get to talk about all the things that Robert didn't include on that list. He left those to me. I think that from the standpoint of communication, sales, and marketing, what's most important that isn't on this list is that ultimately in the past 20 to 24 months, and of course with digital prior to that, the consumers have changed. The end drinker has changed. At the same time, all of the middlemen that go from the thought to the product have shifted how they want to communicate, how they need to allocate their budgets, how much is expected of them, and essentially resource requirements. And what I really want us to focus on today when we're talking about this is the hashtag that's going along with the conference this year, which is Bulk Wine Revolution. Because when we're talking about this, when we're talking about this macro environmental analysis, and I'll just say that as a marketer in wine, I'm pariah generally, so I'm going to say all the things that have to do with money and sales that people don't want to generally acknowledge. Yes, these are challenges. There are also opportunities for every one of the brands who want to say, this is a challenge to my competitor, this is a challenge to the marketplace, and I can find a way to work around this and to kick ass where nobody else is going. So that's going to be my take on how we address these particular issues today, is saying, right, how do we actually turn this into a benefit for tomorrow, but into a long-term benefit toward a bulk wine revolution. And what does that mean? So, let's start. You want to start with your list?
No, I'm going to leave this to you. Keep going.
You're going to leave it to me. Okay, so one of the things that underpins a lot of what we're seeing here is an absolutely massive economic shift that we're not talking about too much in wine, because we're not seeing it directly as what's affecting our pocketbooks. What we've got is retirement of a very large portion of our consumer audience, and this is definitely affecting income, sales, and diversification of our sales streams in America. It also represents a shift in branding as a whole, and when I say that, what I mean is going from a more staid, traditional producer model to now being experimental, being innovative, something I know that you want to touch upon.
And if I could just also pick up on that, I think crucially, my own French wines are going to be, we sell about 4 million bottles, and the US is one of our biggest markets. With all of the cost increases we've seen in France, of every kind, not just grapes, but obviously in terms of packaging and shipping and everything else, our wine is going to be $1 more per bottle, almost certainly, and maybe more. And we're going to see the same problem in Russia and India and elsewhere. This is at a time where the consumers we're selling to, the traditional consumers, may actually have less money in their pockets than they had this year. So I think this is going to be, I'm going to throw this back at you, Polly. It's one of the questions we're looking at, I'm certainly looking at, is who am I selling my wine to?
Well, the answer to that is that we are in the middle of the greatest wealth transfer in history of literally trillions of dollars transferring from the hands of the baby boomers right past Gen X, because we're just never going to see any of that to go with our student loans, and into the hands of the millennials. The millennials as an audience, and this is something that came up when you and I were prepping with this. There's no one audience anymore. Everyone is conflicted. I can't identify a single pattern that links everyone in a room together ever again. But what we're seeing from the millennials on down is that they are very conflicted about authority, about money, about alcohol, about the environment, about sustainability. And where marketing comes in is that we always have to balance our internal expectations of an act with why we are presenting it in public. And what I've just said is we know that some of the things that we do are manipulative, because a millennial or a Gen Z who tells you that sustainability matters, well, it doesn't in their consumer spending profile. We know that. And this will come up as we continue talking today.
And I think one of the things that we've seen, I think that's fascinating, and picking up on your point about millennials being, if they have one characteristic in common, because they are all different, they are shaking the tree of tradition, if you like. But that will mean that some of them will be in hipster bars in Brooklyn and New York wanting wine that looks and tastes like cider, and others will be buying canned wine, which has nothing sustainable or traditional or anything else, and it may well have bourbon, been in bourbon barrels or whatever, because that is their other way of shaking the tree of tradition. So don't assume that being iconoclastic, to use the word, is going to come in one form. Your millennial will actually rebel in more than one way, and those ways may be totally diametrically opposed.
And that's going to get worse. So another thing that we don't talk about too much, yes? Can we influence it?
Yeah.
That's a great question. So what we had is we saw this particular behavior occurring. You get it in the millennials, you'll get it in the Gen Zs, and we can speak about that separately. What happened with COVID, and specifically with the lockdowns, and this is part of the economic shift and sort of innovation and some of the challenges that we're facing in all of our markets, was, for want of a better word, there was this, when we locked down globally, conversations started to happen in social spaces that had never been public before. And that actually is one of the underlying causes of the current labor issues that we're having, for instance, in America, where you had, I work a lot in development and in tech, and you've got a wellspring of talented millennials who have been told, you don't have to work for the man anymore. You can work from home. Your starting salary needs to be $400,000 a year because we work in tech and we're worth it. But we get that in wine. I have one client who had one of their tasting room staff say, I've been working from home for over a year. I want to keep my job, but I don't want to come into the tasting room. And all of us, of course, are going to look at it and say, how do you envision that happening? So what we know about millennials is they consider themselves an audience of one, and they spend their money based on their perceived self-identity. So the nice thing about that is where there may have been a time that we sat in a room like this and we felt like competitors, actually our job, and to solve this, is that we each understand who our customer is. Maybe it's our customer today, maybe it's the evolving customer, maybe it's the customer that we want because we've got the data that says this is a financially sustainable track to go down. And we actually create a business model that speaks to a much narrower audience than perhaps 15 years ago, pre-digital communication, we thought was the route to go.
So if I can pick up on that, we just go beyond millennials, and I think that's important to say, people with all of whatever age have been living on screens. And that has had more than one effect. We've seen the bubble effect with vaxing, we've seen the bubble effect in all sorts of ways. People are getting their information from the very small, it may be globally big, but potentially a small number of people. But it's also transparency is coming in. So it may or may not be real transparency. The transparency may be that they think that the 5G masts are putting stuff into their body, but they think that they have got access to the real facts. But that is also, in terms of our business, people who have been going to restaurants and paying $50 for bottles of wine have now been buying those same bottles of wine for $12 online. That's another level of transparency. And they are telling their friends that they've bought these bottles of wine for $12. We can no longer rely on their ignorance in the way that we used to.
Yeah. And in fact, that sort of democratization of knowledge, that is what we all had the time, really, to embrace. We talked about it a lot before lockdown, but suddenly we realized you don't need university because you can learn every skill on the planet. And it doesn't matter if you're 13, you can still make tens of thousands of dollars per month by becoming a content creator with your iPhone. You know, the boundaries of the haves and the have-nots have shifted from a space of finance to a space of information, to a space of action, of being able to do something. And that has had a profound effect on the wine world, actually, not only because they may know the cost of something, but because they want, for a person who is interested in wine, so I'm not saying this is going to be every TikToker on the planet, but they expect to be able to go into their digital spaces or to stand at an event, talk to the people who are part of the production process, understand the stories. They expect the truth out of us, and they expect it to be easily found, easily understood. And I think that that's something really to discuss as we're sitting here. Hold on, just the global nature of our marketing is such a profound shift in how we talk about what we are making and what is important.
So I'm conscious of time, and I'd like, if there is any questions at the end, to come up with some concrete suggestions. So whether or not I'm a company or a region, whether I'm just a bulk wine company or I do both, what do you see? What are some takeaways?
Okay, so I've been pondering this because I don't work a lot with the bulk wine portion of our industry, but I do work with clients who rely upon it, and I do work with a lot of financial modeling. And so I have an idea that I'm just going to put out there, and I think maybe like 2 people in the room will hear it, and everybody else will think I'm crazy. But what we have right now is we have a real problem with data in wine. All of our data happens after wine has been sold. That means that we can't adapt, we can't be resilient, we can't respond to consumer trends. So we've got this data and information issue on this side. In bulk wine, we also have volatility and commodification. So my take on this is, what if the bulk wine revolution was actually that we as collectives, as co-ops, as associations, we actually became the people with the knowledge about what is happening in the future of wine based on great data, good analytics, forecasting, not being retrospective. So when we're standing in a room and we don't have to say, I couldn't sell that Shiraz last year because there was a problem. I can say, you know, I know next year this is going to sell, and this is how I know it, because I actually have the data that proves that.
So if I can chip into that, and we're thinking, I mean, we've discussed this a lot amongst ourselves, the people that we don't talk enough about are the people of whom I used to be one. I used to be a consumer wine critic. They're what I call the gatekeepers. And those gatekeepers include the buyers from the big supermarkets globally and the sommeliers. And these are the people who are telling you that your wine has to be minerally. They're the people who tell you all the things that they know. Quick story, just as enough. I did some consultancy for a champagne brand. And they said to me, what do you think about zero dosage champagne? And I said, it's not my favorite style. Some of it's okay, but it's not my favorite. They said, we make some. And I said, fine. They said, we don't make very much. I said, fine. They said, we don't make any money on it. And I said, fine. And they said, we don't drink it ourselves. And I went, fine. And they said, it's the cleverest thing we've ever done. It comes out of our marketing budget. Basically, every time the sommeliers and the right journalists come to us, we give them the zero dosage, and they go, wow, this is wonderful. And some of them say, can we buy it? And we say, no, we don't make very much. But hey, taste our Blanc de Blanc, of which we make lots, and we make lots of profit, and we sell it. My point about this is that we need, picking up on Polly's point here, if we understand what the consumers really want and work to that rather than what we're told they want. So just as a quick, just to finish this, the winery that Treasury just bought for $315 million that makes big battery Chardonnay. I make wine in France. An Australian distributor came to us in France and said, could we make Australian-style battery Chardonnay in France? Because the Australian producers didn't want to make it, but Australian consumers wanted to buy it. And that, to me, is a very interesting little, and it's not easy, by the way, to make Australian-style Chardonnay in southern France.
So it's two different ways of kind of tackling the same beast, which is my belief, whether I'm sitting here with bulk wine or with the innumerable wine brands who are constantly struggling with their margins, is that right now we are at a vector point where we can shift the balance of power from the way things have always been done to a new way of doing it. And people who are going to take action and be forward thinking are going to lay the groundwork for that. So examples that I would look at, something like we can shift the narrative of bulk wine to demonstrate that it has the potential to be the most resilient, the best margins, the most sustainable, that it actually puts the consumer, their values at the fore of our industry very rapidly, when in fact, for so long, we have been at the behest of years of tradition. So that's my take on the bulk wine revolution, is that we can improve the value, reduce the commodification, create more of a linchpin situation by ourselves actually embracing what we bring, the things that have often been discounted in publications, in communications. And in doing that, what that does mean, and I do think that this is a real challenge, is that now it falls upon us, everyone in this room, to market ourselves better. I've done the Tiki tour around the exhibition space, and I certainly see that there are some companies that are going great guns on expressing their values, what's important to them, what matters to the people who are buying from you, to really speaking to what I would describe as the customer's customers. And there are others who haven't.
So I'm going to give a quick takeaway. The fascinating thing about this fair, which I've come to, I think, for 10 years now, what I love about it is the conversations we all have on the stands, the fact that we blend wines on the stands ourselves and make wines here. Now, what happens to us? Some of you in this room, how many are you producers, by the way? Hands up, any producers in the wine? So some of you producers. Do you make, those of you who are producers, do you do bulk and bottle? And do you do wine tourism? Yeah. When you're doing, and I'll take you off the hook here. When I talk to companies that do wine tourism, most of the ones I know only show wines they sell. Very few of them actually show experimental wines to the thousands of people who walk through their doors. Very few of them try out new packaging on the thousands of people who walk through their doors. So number one, the cheapest form of consumer research you will ever do is with those people. The So just finish this. Second thing is we've all talked a lot about wine tourism. COVID has taught us that wine tourism is something we can't rely on when people can't come to us. But with environmental concerns, we may well see that fewer people are going to travel to your winery at the end of a long road somewhere. So we, as an industry, are probably going to have to go to the people more than expecting the people to come to us. And I'm suggesting combining these two thoughts together, actually go out, meet the people, test the people on what they like.
I think what's most notable about that is we're already seeing that if you don't do it, other people are going to be doing it for you. Someone's going to be telling your story, and you need to decide who that is. And the example that I'm going to give is that you and I sat through a presentation by Archer Ruse, canned wine, who, great guns in America, like they sell plenty, but what they're talking about is we're sharing the wine from this region of the world and that region of the world, and we're telling the story of this place and this person. They're not telling the story of the growers in this case, although that certainly does happen. They're not necessarily telling the stories of the producers. They own that narrative. And while that's great for them, and I'm not knocking them, and they're not a client, and I'm going to get in trouble if this ends up on wine Twitter, the point being that someone is going to own that story. And right now is a moment when you can own that story, whether it is the story of your sustainability choices, in the vineyard, in production, whether it is more of a generalized story of why bulk wine actually has the potential to overcome so many of these problems that our bottled wine clients won't. They'll never be able to manage that. That we need to have a louder voice.
And we've got that's a wind up. That's a wind up sign or a question? Question. Go ahead. You're going to have to shout, I think.
There are
There's
no
no dumb
dumb
questions.
questions.
I'm here to understand the bulk market. I work with oak extracts, enological chemicals. And I would like to understand what is this bulk wine revolution you're talking about. What, if you could, because you mentioned it in your speech, but for me it's not really clear what is it about the bulk wine revolution, what it means in terms of business, really.
Okay. So when I use that, it's really because when I look around and I see the things that we're talking about, the restarting the business, I think that every part of a system can look at a revolution within its own purview and skill set. So for me, what I'm looking at is how we communicate, how we market, and how we sell. And my experience to date has been that the bulk wine sector often allows people further down the chain to carry those stories, to carry the weight of that communication. And in fact, we can establish better value and by doing that, stronger relationships, better what we would describe as brand monogamy in a sense, so better relationships long-term, loyalty, by actually ourselves through our marketing and communication, making it easier for our customers to sell to their customers. And that means a bit more narrative. That means more transparency. Sometimes it may be, there's an expression in English, don't hide your light under a bushel. There are a lot of things that we do that simply because it's not traditionally been a part of bulk wine communications, those are not part of a public discussion. They're private discussions that go on in an exhibitor space. Those tiny spaces, that's part of what died with lockdown.
So I'll give you a quick answer. And it's not our expression.
I can't do that,
It's
sorry.
not our expression, by the way. It came from the organizers. I've been coming here, as I said, for 10 years. So many people have said, why are you going to the bulk wine fair? Well, I guess Amsterdam's nice. I mean, the wine, who cares? Bulk wine has a dirty image. It is the pornography of the wine world. Nobody admits to it. Nobody actually says, hey, that really nice wine, that started out as a bulk purchase in Amsterdam. So to me, the revolution is to actually take bulk wine out of that box, point one. And secondly, to improve margins. So we can actually make money out of it, and to actually then, to Polly's point, be able to market it better, which improves our image, and it becomes a virtuous circle. I just want to say very briefly, we're tight on time. I come to Amsterdam.
Aren't we isn't the next one canceled?
Oh, is it cancelled?
Yeah.
No, it's not cancelled.
It's not, oh, okay.
I come to Amsterdam to fall in love, really, and I've fallen in love twice at this fair. The first time I fell in love with this fair was when I saw the mini flexi, the small flexi tank, which meant that I could move small volumes of wine easily. And when I saw this, I thought that's a wonderful thing. I've fallen in love this morning. And it's a British thing. I don't get the chance to be that sort of proud of my country these days very often. There is a British mini canning machine over there as you walk into this fair. And it costs the same as a small car. And so for a lot of us, that's a lot of money. For a lot of cooperatives, that's not a lot of money. It's on wheels. You can move it along, and it will can a small batch. It will move of cans for you. To me, that's a game changer, because it means that I can test things. And I think, well, will cans work? Do I have to send my wine to somebody over there who's going to can a minimum number of it? No, I could, for a relatively small investment, for a decent-sized winery, do some tests with that. And that's the way that I think we should all start thinking. And that's the crossover, to me, between being in the bulk wine business and being in the branded, profitable business as well.
I mean, I guess I would just sum that up by saying one begets the next.
Yeah.
So.
Any questions? Because I know Thomas wants to throw us out in 5. How long have we got, Thomas? We've got half a minute? No.
2.5 minutes.
How long have we got?
Let's go. Any questions?
We've got 5 minutes.
Yes.
Do you think there's an advantage for the end consumer to better understand about the bulk wine?
Hell yeah. I sure do.
To be able to talk about sustainability benefits and so on. I feel like the end consumer has no idea
Yeah.
about how much wine gets them. But is that a benefit for the bulk wine industry?
It's a benefit, but I listen every morning to the farming program in Britain, and I know just what percentage of chickens still live in cages. The consumer, we're going to put ingredient listing on packaging for wine. The consumers don't look at the ingredient packaging on food packaging. So let's do it. Let's tell the people who want to know, and let's hope they're going to talk to their friends and so on. But let's not imagine that by telling them that we were talking last night to Greencroft, and they've got essentially a they're carbon negative, essentially, or they're an incredibly environmentally positive company. How many consumers are really that interested? But more importantly, how many of the buyers, the supermarket buyers, care? We've got to actually create that narrative at every level.
Okay. I might argue some points on that, but it's
we
5
said we
minutes. We'll let that one go. I think that it's invaluable. I think as long as we sit in the shadows, we can never actually wrest the power that we need from the people who are paying us money, and therefore get higher margins and do better.
Well, we do agree on that.
Yeah.
Another question somewhere in our last 2 minutes or minute. Nope.
Nope.
Well, can I say thank you very much. Come and talk to us separately at the end if you'd like to. We'd love to have conversations with you individually.
Look, I got 30 seconds, so I'm going to say something as a wine marketer. When I talk to people who are going out and they're like, yes, I have this dream of having a winery and I want to do this, I tell them, go source bulk wine. Forget investing your money in anything other than producing great wine that you can adapt readily, that you can produce in small batches. It's better for your cash flow. It's better for your consumers. It's better for your brand growth. So in that sense, when I'm sitting here, I'm saying it as someone who preaches this message to my clients all the time.
Likewise. Thank you all very much. I wish everybody a very good show, whatever you're here for, buying, selling, whatever. Thank you.